Good morning, everyone. It is 11 a.m., so we are going to go ahead and get started. Just a reminder, if you are having any trouble with your speakers, doing sound check, anything like that, please make sure that you type your questions into our chat pod on the left side of the screen, and our Learning Tree representatives will be able to help you out with that. So as it is top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I would like to welcome you all to the Cyber Truth of Teleworking and Working from Home, a two-part series presented by Bob Cromwell. My name is Morgan Floyd, Information Security Training and Awareness Coordinator for HHS, and I will be helping to facilitate today's webinar along with our Learning Tree International representatives. So a few housekeeping items before we begin. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted to the Information Security Training and Awareness SharePoint site, along with the documents currently available for download in the file SharePod. All attendees will receive a link to the recording and a survey after the webinar. At the end of today's webinar, we will open the floor to questions. So just a reminder, you are all currently in listen-only mode. However, at any time during the presentation, you may type in your questions using the chat pod. And as I said earlier, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please utilize that chat pod and we will assist you. So, part one of our two-part series will cover what you thought you knew about teleworking and what the real truth is. This is the first presentation of our new CyberFit initiative, presented by the HHS Chief Information Security Office. CyberFit is a security awareness initiative focused on bringing relevant security topics to our agency in an open communication format. We will host monthly webinars to build up your cybersecurity strength and stamina and help your awareness skills stay in shape. Our goal through CyberFit is to speak on security awareness topics not only relevant to our agency, but also to our everyday lives. So, a little bit of background information about our speaker today. Bob Cromwell has been a cybersecurity consultant for more than 20 years. He holds multiple cybersecurity certifications, including the CISSP, Security Plus, and he holds a PhD in electrical engineering from Purdue University. He has consulted across many industries, including health insurance, federal and state governments, aerospace, and many others. And with that, Bob, I turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you. And good morning, everybody. And I've gotten down to Austin a few times to teach. And if any of you are seeing me for the second time, hi again. I'm not sure who all's out there. 450 people connected in. So chances are pretty good somebody's been in a class of mine before. So part one of this, working from home, well, the first part is actually about working totally remotely. You're not at home, you're on a business trip is the scenario for this. And, thinking about, if you're working remotely in general, could anything go wrong? Oh, yeah. Definitely. Well, what? Quite a lot potentially. So what I've got is a scenario for us to think about. I'm going to tell you a story, and it is not about your agency. This is not about Texas Health and Human Services. This isn't about anybody from the state of Texas. This is about somebody from some other state who went on a business trip, and I'll tell you a little bit about the trip that they went on. And there'll be some things that seem pretty reasonable, sound pretty reasonable initially, but it turns out that they aren't. And I know that particularly with the number of people involved, there's going to be a really wide variety or wide range of backgrounds on this. So some of you may be cringing pretty hard all the way through the story saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe this part. Oh, I can't believe they did that next. But it's because other people would say, well, yeah, that sounds reasonable. So we're going to be taking a look at how to protect information, and in particular, Texas Health and Human Services data is going to be, ultimately our goal. The story is not about Texas HHS, but hopefully you can all take away something that'll help you to protect health and human services. and to some extent the user who is out on a business trip. And then the plan for next month is to concentrate more on the employee and the employee's family. So, when you're doing work at home or just when you're on the internet, when you're doing things with information, everything is information these days, how to protect you and your whole family. So, the story here is that Mary went on a business trip, and of course, and this is some variation on Murphy's Law. Of course, something came up, and of course it was urgent. So she gets back to the room at the end of the day and been in business meetings all afternoon and has a business dinner to go to before too long here. But okay, and really quick, let me check the messages. Oh my gosh, there's this emergency. The boss says something just absolutely has to get done. There's some spreadsheets. You need to retrieve these spreadsheets. She doesn't have them with them. Doesn't have them with her. Needs to retrieve those from work and select some of those records and make some updates, and then print out and mail the updated version. The result of doing that quick work. Now, the good thing is she's staying in a business-oriented hotel, the sort of place that says these are going to be the issues that our guests are going to have, and we want to attract these guests. So we got wireless. We got good working wireless through the whole building. It's not like you've got there's only one wing or certain rooms that it works in. Nah, wireless is great through the whole building. There's a nice printer down in the lobby. And given all of that, it looks like she'll have time to pull this out if everything goes well and still get to the dinner on time. So she gets out her laptop and again, good news for her. She says, I'm so glad that I've got my laptop with me. I'm very familiar with this thing. It's kind of beat up. It's scuffed and scratched and so on, because me and this laptop, we've been through a lot of these business trips. And this is not the first time that, oh, guess what? There's this sudden emergency has come up. And the great thing is she's really, really familiar. It's not the latest and greatest, but she's so familiar with this thing that she's going to be able to just step right through. So Wi-Fi onto the hotel wireless. And this isn't her only business trip this year. So we're talking either pre or post pandemic times. She does a fair amount of business travel. So she's in the rewards program with elite status. She stays at one of their properties enough times in a year, elite. So hey, free access on the wireless as well. But I mean, it's the same wireless whether you're paying for it or not. It's just, hey, a little less. She's not going to have another itemized expense item for paying $10 a night or something for the wireless. So she puts in her rewards number and a room number in this secure firewall, because this is a business hotel, and you turn on your laptop, you try to get onto the internet, and you're confronted with this secure firewall page, and you've got to authenticate into it. It's easy for her to do, and she gets on there, and it works really well. What a nice hotel this is. So she needs to retrieve the data. So fires up FileZilla, and she's got to sign in. She's retrieving these from work, so she's got to sign in to the agency server because, of course, security is very important. And she signs in with her username and this, a hard to type, long, complicated password, gets in and retrieves the data that she needs. But they don't open right up. So what's happened is, since the last time she's done anything with these particular data sets, apparently some colleague has made some update in them and saved them in the very latest version of something. And yeah, she said, it's that Tom guy that I work with, and he's always going on about he's the cutting edge, and he knows the cutting edge, and he uses the cutting edge stuff. And yeah, Tom, that's great, but now Mary can't open these files. Well, she's dealt with these little surprises that Tom or whoever has left for her before. So she needs to, it's in a slightly different version, and she needs to get this thing converted. Well, if you ask Google document conversion, there's a lot of returns on that search. Now, some of them, oh gosh, you'd have to set up an account and put in a credit card number and pay for everything. There are some that say, oh, kind of a trial or not even trial, like freemium, I've seen it called, where it's free if you're only doing little jobs, and if you wanted to do something really big, you have to pay for it. But little jobs you can do for free. Well, she works for a state agency. These are not little jobs. This is big data. So Texas, it says, well, whatever state she's actually from, Oklahoma, Louisiana, whoever you see is the neighboring state that messes things up. Hey, look, here is a site that will do conversions for free, even for the large data files. So great. We live in an age of wonders. How long ago do you have, not very far into the past, that all this would have been science fiction, or more like, I don't even know what you're talking about here. But now you can ask Google, I need this service. You can find it. You can do this service. Wow, fantastic. She's got them converted. Now she can open those files. And like I said, she's really familiar with the laptop, so okay, now that it's actually been able to ingest these files, she can quickly find what she needs, make the changes and so on. And okay, note to self, tease tomorrow Tom when you get back, and tell some horror story about how many hours it took her to solve this conversion problem that he left for her. Really, it just took her like a minute or two to do the search and do the upload and the download and everything. But she'll get him to buy her coffee or something like this. She'll get her revenge on him. So she's found the records that need to be updated, made the updates, and then out of this huge data set, then selected just those. And she needs to print this thing. Okay, well, you can print it into a file. And you put the file on a USB stick. So you've got a PDF file. P is for portable document format. That's what that stands for, meaning that all different operating systems can deal with it. It's sort of this universal language, and it's also portable because she's got it on this little. Which side is my camera on? She's got it on this little USB stick, easy to carry around. And she knows down in the lobby, they've got a couple of internet workstations and a laser printer down there. And she saw that when she checked in, and probably checked in advance to make sure they had such a thing, thinking that something like this may come up. So she goes down there, plugs it in, prints the thing out, and, use kind of small font. And it only took 9 sheets of paper. And rule of thumb, as far as I know it is, you can pretty safely count on getting 5 sheets of paper in a full-size business envelope and have that weigh just under 1 ounce. So if it's 5 sheets of paper, 1 stamp would do it. Well, it was 9, so it's going to take 2 stamps. Okay, but that's a solvable problem. And she's thinking about that. She says, oh, it's pretty much done at this point. But what I ought to do is just sign into email and tell the manager, okay, I've responded to this. It's on the way. I just need to get an envelope and put it into the mail. So she goes across the front desk, and of course it's a nice business hotel, so they're going to be really super nice to the guests anyway. And besides, on top of that, just to make sure she's fumbling with some stuff, she makes sure that she accidentally drops her Elite Rewards card on the counter and says, oops, and pick that back up. Make sure they know she's elite. And then she can ask, would it maybe somehow be possible for me to buy a business envelope and 2 stamps? And they're going to say, oh no, no, we'll give it to you. No need to pay for it. Here's an envelope. Here's 2 stamps, and put your stuff in there and, write the address on there and give it back, and we'll put it in our outgoing mail. And, it's about dinner time. So it'll go out first thing in the morning. Wow. And Mary's done with this in, not much more time than it took me to tell the story. So, Mary's the hero, right? Maybe. Did anything go wrong? Did anything not go wrong? I mean, that was just a dumpster fire of a story, really. And the free stamps in the envelope, that was nice. Other than the free stamps in the envelope, everything else was a disaster. So I got to put this part first. I got to tell this part first. This is just by far the worst. This is the part that would make me cringe the hardest in hearing that story. Is the part where she signed into her email on a computer in a hotel lobby. Um, that is just the most likely to go the most horribly wrong. You should never sign in to anything in a publicly shared computer like a hotel lobby. Assume that it has somehow been taken over for identity theft. There's what's called spyware, and there's what's called keyloggers, things that exist to collect usernames and passwords. And they could take the form of software. So I've got this little gadget here. So it's an adapter. Okay, so it's got a old school PS2 type keyboard mouse connector on one end. It's got USB on the other. And somewhere around here, I got one that goes the other way. Um, Instead of going from PS2 to USB, it goes from USB to PS2. And so, nowadays you buy a computer and everything connects via that sort of a connector. But, there was a time when sometimes the computers had one sort and your peripherals had the other sort of connector, or the other way around. And so these sorts of things were common. Now, the one that I had lying around handy to show you in this one's sort of this lime green color, but a lot of times they're beige or they're gray. And so it's a thing that if you noticed it, and you're not going to notice it, but I mean, if you actually went looking for it, if for some reason you wanted to unplug the keyboard, you might notice that, oh, on the end of the cable, there's this little adapter thingy. Well, maybe it's an adapter. Maybe it's actually a piece of hardware that has been put there as a keylogger, and these things exist. Amazon used to sell them openly. And about 6 months ago, Amazon pulled all that stuff off of their online shopping. Um, Alibaba did as well. You can still buy them. Excuse me. It's just you can't get them at Amazon anymore. But they're still hardware keyloggers. And you think, well, why on earth would somebody be selling these things? That's illegitimate. Well, the marketing was you're not a good parent if you don't put these on your children's computers. So you can steal your children's identity and sign into their social media. Um, and then they also say, oh yeah, and by the way, if you don't trust your spouse, maybe it'd be useful for that, but that's unpleasant to think of, and we're not going to make a big deal of it. But these things are out there in the market. The bad guys would use them. And it's a thing like if you're going to go fishing, where would you go fishing? Well, where there's fish. If you want to steal identity from individuals and from government agencies and major corporations, you need to go where those people are going to be behaving dangerously, like business-oriented hotels. And you slip into there, the bad guy slips into the lobby sometime when it's kind of busy, and not super busy, but not super quiet. The bad guy seems to belong in that setting. Bought a newspaper, sits there and looks through the newspaper until there's nobody using the computer. And this is only going to take about 10 seconds. Walk over there, unplug the keyboard, plug this thing in, plug the keyboard into it, and then go sit on a different couch for a while and look some more at the paper and then stroll out. And then once every week or so, come back in, never have to touch the computer again. The little keylogger gadget, there's plenty of room in there for a Bluetooth chip. So the bad guy gets close enough to the computer, like, within about 20 feet, and the smartphone can collect all of the harvested usernames and passwords off of there. Never sign into a hotel lobby computer, okay? Mary's email is in the hands of criminals. Now, what do I mean by Mary's email? If it's her personal identity, or personal email, that your personal email has become the master key to your identity. That's the thing you use if you're setting up an account for something. We need to make sure it's really you. We'll either send a message to your phone or we will send you an email. And if you're doing something with your phone, they say, well, we have to send it to something else. So if you're trying to do something with your phone account, they're going to send it to your email, which would be the bad. Now the bad guy has control of your phone as well. Now, worse yet, and that's just for Mary, worse yet in terms of numbers, what if this was not her personal email, but her state agency email account? Those credentials are the master key to at least hundreds of thousands of personal identities. So, like I said, that part makes me cringe the hardest. That part needs to come first. In time order for the rest of it, what about that hotel wireless? Well, there's absolutely no security at all. What's worse is there's an illusion of security. So the thing about you try to get onto the internet and you get redirected to this secure firewall page, it's called a captive portal. And so one thing you have to do is you have to click a little box that says, I read the rules and I promise I'll behave. And then you fill in something for billing is what it comes down to. And if you're a rewards member, you've got to put in the rewards number that matches to the room number so they're reasonably certain it's you. If you're not a rewards member, then you put in your name and the room and they go together. And now you're going to get a $10 a night or more surcharge on the room. So, clicking the box makes the hotel chain's lawyers happy. And putting in the name and the room number makes the hotel chain's accountants happy. There's absolutely no encryption in any of that. And there's no security at all. But, you had to do these things. There was a requirement for you to enter some privileged information. And there were things on that screen that talked about it being a secure internet, a secure wireless, a secure firewall, something like that. It leads people that don't know how this stuff works to think, oh, I'm safe now. So, really? Yeah, really. If there was really going to be security, then you would have to configure an encryption key on your system. And the sort of people that stay at business hotels are going to tend to get that wrong. And they are just going to savagely tear into that hotel chain on TripAdvisor or Yelp or wherever. They're going to say, never stay here. It's a horrible hotel. The internet doesn't work, because they weren't able to enter that key. It would also require, if you're going to have a secure setting, if you're going to have actual encryption, that gateway would have to be maintained, that gateway at the hotel. But it's a hotel, and they don't have staff that are trained for network engineering or network servers or cybersecurity or any of that stuff. They're trained to do, the obvious hotel tasks. So yeah, business hotel wireless is totally insecure. Now, like if I go off and do a teaching job for Learning Tree, they'll put me up in a business hotel sort of setting for the length of the class. And what I would love to do, I've gotten down to Austin, I guess 4 times now, and I say I guess because they've just been blurs. I had so many other things going on at the time. I had to come in on a Sunday, set the class up, do the class, leave Saturday morning. What little I've seen of Austin, it looks like a really cool place. I would like to stay on, and ideally, Learning Tree would fly me down there, and I'd teach the class for the week, and then I'd stay on for a few days. Well, I'm not going to stay in the business hotel because it's going to be pretty expensive. I mean, I'm going to go stay in the cheap hostel. and I'll just have a bed in a shared room with the other hippies. And, we'd be paying like 25 bucks a night. I would expect there to actually be secure wireless there. In that sort of a setting, if you go to somewhere you pay like 20, 25, 30 bucks a night at a hostel, they'll actually have decent wireless security. They'll have WPA2 encryption set up. There will be a pre-shared key. You have to enter this into the wireless interface settings. And before this point, typical business travelers' eyes would have rolled up into their head like, I don't even know what he's talking about. Business hotels just say, well, look, network security is not our thing, but they don't come out and say that. It's definitely so. So it's like a teeter-totter, or I don't know, maybe you call them seesaws down there, but there's a picture. There's the plank and there's the two kids, and it's out in the playground. They go up and down. Well, for one of them to go up, the other one has to go down. So security, convenience, they're on opposite ends of that teeter-totter. If you want to make something easier to use, chances are you're going to have to make security worse. I go stay at the hostel, and I've got good security, but I have to know how to set it up. And they're going to say, here is this key, and it's a big, long, jumbled string, and I'm going to have to first know how to enter that, and second, get it exactly right, or I'm not going to get on that network at all. So my convenience has gone down a little bit, but my security's gone way up. At the business hotel, it's the other way around. The convenience has gone way up, but security's down in the basement. So what about that download that Mary made? And, to tell the story, I said FileZilla. I don't know if that's exactly what you use, but like I said, the story wasn't about your agency. But FileZilla is really, really popular. I learned about it. People were using it as a verb. People told me, "Oh, you need to FileZilla that data." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" And they said, "FileZilla. It's how you transfer files." Well, I look into it. Oh, okay. So it runs FTP and it runs some other things. They're talking about one particular tool, but it's really easy to use. Ooh, that teeter-totter, when you say this is really easy to use, good chance it may be really insecure. It's easy to use. It's popular. I mean, it's likely a state agency would use it internally. And inside your perimeter, however you used it, inside your perimeter would not be terribly dangerous. There's safe ways to use it, and you can use FileZilla to do secure authentication followed by secure transfer, and you've got to do both those things. You have to authenticate securely, and you got to transfer the data securely. FileZilla works in secure and insecure modes. So the thing about security is a lot of times in one of these incidents, we don't know if did Mary really get hacked in all this? We don't know. That's the horrible thing. We'll have to assume the worst. One thing that we don't know from that story, the server she connected to, is it possible for her to connect in an insecure mode? I don't know. If the people who set up the server were assuming it will only be used from inside, then maybe not. And oh my goodness, she did this on a wide open hotel wireless. What about that document conversion? Well, why did it have to happen in the first place? How come this Tom guy, cutting edge Tom Tomorrow, how come he has software that seems to be well ahead of Mary's? So yeah, in the story it said it was kind of scuffed up and dented and scratched and so on, the hardware. It sounds like her software is kind of old too, or that conversion shouldn't really have been necessary. How long has it been since her applications have been patched? And she seems, from the story, she has this attitude that her coworker is new for the sake of new. That's his thing. He wants to be Tomorrow Tom. But these updates plug security holes. And then the actual act of the conversion. So where was it? Somewhere Google mentioned. Yeah, but where's that? physically, geographically, where is that server and who runs it? Um, if you were somebody like, say, the Russian mob, Russian organized crime, I mean, they deal in personal information. They steal and sell that stuff. Um, wouldn't it make sense to set up a site to do document conversion? That'd be pretty easy to do. I mean, you do the whole thing with free software, um, and have a site whose only purpose was to collect all the data that naive people out there uploaded to be converted. Sure, that sounds like a very good idea if you were a branch of the Russian mob to do that. So is that conversion site saving data that got submitted? Another thing it could be doing, and it could be doing this at the same time, is pushing malware out to clients that aren't patched. And it does sound like Mary's laptop is not fully up to date with patches, so who knows what malicious software has been installed on her system from that, just from visiting that website. And then if you think about legality, and I mentioned teaching some classes in Austin, and one that I've taught the most down there has been, it's actually a cloud security certification, but it seems to me that it's really more about compliance issues than the cloud, because cloud computing makes compliance harder because it's not obvious. And sometimes it's pretty hard to figure out just exactly where something is. And if you're moving data into a different jurisdiction, you've got legal issues all over the place. And if you were somebody like, say, a health and human services organization, yeah, there's personal identity itself, identifying information about a person. Health, HIPAA. There is a second requirement, a federal legal requirement, in addition to whatever state of Texas has specific to them. People have to pay for health services, PCI, payment card industry compliance. But payment card industry isn't actually a law, it's an industry regulation. But things like HIPAA, things about bank records and so on, those are legal risks, and there's these concept of the data subject. Well, fancy term for who is the person. The data subject is who it's about. And then what type of data? Was this medical information? Was this medical insurance information? Was this some other sort of financial information? What are the ages on these data subjects? And if they're young, this is children. Now it's even worse as far as legal issues go. And where was that? Where geographically is that server? Well, I did a search, and PDF to doc.com, there's a popular conversion site, and it's .com. That means U.S. business, right? No, that's what you might think. That server's actually in Germany, but it's .com. Yeah, I know. There's another one. There's this convertio.co, and they say right on the main page, they say, we keep your files in the European Union. Well, if you're on Traceroute, that server's actually in the San Francisco Bay Area somewhere, which is not a part of Europe. And its domain name is .co. That isn't short for com, it's, as in commercial, it's short for Colombia, which is in South America. So, I'm not saying that those two sites are unsafe. I am saying they're not what you would, maybe naively, hopefully think they ought to be. And I can't say that they're unsafe, but I don't have any practical way of proving that they're safe. They're an unknown, and we're going to have to err on the side of caution if you're dealing with state agency data about hundreds of thousands of people. What about this guy? What about the USB stick? Well, we've already concluded you cannot trust a public computer sitting out in the hotel lobby. So given that, we have to assume the USB stick is infected once she went down there and plugged it in. And once she goes back up to the room and eventually turns on her laptop and plugs it in, we're going to have to assume that her laptop is infected until we could conclusively prove differently, which is surprisingly difficult. What about the printer? And I understand that's a particular interest with your agency, a particular concern, I should say. The fancy term you may hear somebody talk about is data remnants. Um, how often do I use the word remnants? I had to look it up. I mean, it's like, yeah, I know it if I hear it. To spell it, that was a bit of a challenge. Uncommonly used term. It's a really specific term that has to do with memory. Any printer has memory of some sort. And so the unpleasant, uncomfortable question is that sensitive agency data, you put the thing on the computer and there's going to be a huge data remnants problem on the computer as well. And then it went over the cable to the printer. Has that sensitive data been purged from the printer's memory? We don't really have any way of knowing. With a computer, it can be tough to figure out, but at least we have some tools for doing this. On the printer, we don't have any way to conclusively prove that memory has been purged. And printers will be more than they seem. So this is not a good graphic. Here's this little clip art of a little inkjet printer. Well, we're not talking about little inkjet printers. We're talking about a more sophisticated printer. And you get a more sophisticated printer, and it's this cabinet that's a multifunction device, and there's a computer in there, and there's a scanner on the top and a printer that ejects out the side. And so you could use the thing as a fax machine or a photocopier or a printer or whatever. And you might say, oh yeah, I got one of those at home. Or we got one in the office, and it's about yay big, and it sits up on this workbench, or it sits on this counter, or it sits on this table or whatever. No. I'm talking about a thing that I forget which company it is, but they call it a document center. So it's a thing that it sits on the floor and it comes up between waist and chest high. I mean, it's a big deep freeze sort of size and shape of a thing. And it's the sort of device that if you said, oh, I've got this 50-page presentation, or let's say this presentation, I think this has 36 pages in it. You said, I got this 36-page presentation, and there's 582 people that want to get a copy of this thing. Let's just print it. And that would actually be a reasonable thing to say on the sort of printer that I'm thinking about here. To say, we got this 33-page document, we want to make 582 copies of it. We want them collated and stapled and stacked. That does that. It's got a general purpose, multi-user, multitasking operating system inside of it, okay? How do you patch that OS? It's not really practical. What about the logs on the things? Well, it's reasonably easy to get the print logs out, but all the other operating systems that computer runs in there, the operating system logs aren't really accessible. And I'm thinking about the sort of places where I do consulting work, and it's maybe like a defense contractor, and they got sharp technical people there. At a hotel, they don't have IT staff. They don't have IT specialists that could deal with this sort of a thing. But when you get to the larger Laserjet printers, this is the sort of thing that we're talking about. That can be a foothold for sophisticated attackers. So the attackers can get a foothold on some weak desktop system inside, somebody's desktop computer, and they clicked on the wrong thing and some malware got installed. It happens pretty often. The more sophisticated sort of malware could then scan the neighboring network and networks to discover a multifunction dangerously powerful printer, scanner, document center sort of thing. And the buzzwords for this, and you may hear people talking about the intruders did a pivot, or the intruders moved laterally, or the intruders moved horizontally. They're talking about the move from the weak target to the more interesting, more powerful platform. And now they've got control of this printer. And it's just an ideal observation point and data collection point for them. So they can grab a copy of every single document that thing handles and exfiltrate it, sneak it out to the bad guys. Also, that thing is connected to the network in the very core of your organization. There's no better place to listen for usernames and passwords and steal more credentials. And this actually happens. So, this story about this, a guy I know was on the faculty at the Naval Postgraduate School, and they got hit with this. A Chinese military, I think, was who it was eventually blamed on. And at some point, they realized that something along these lines had happened. The horrible part for them was they didn't know how bad it was. They didn't know how long this had been going on. They had some hints as to that, but they didn't have a way, they didn't really have proof of exactly how long it went on, and they had absolutely no idea what data had been stolen. Worst case scenario was pretty nightmarish for them. So, cool story. Hopefully that got your attention. That kind of intrigued you. Hopefully, as a more general concept, you thought, wow, this computer stuff, I need to be aware that things may be more complicated than I thought. Now, are you going to get hacked like Naval Postgraduate School? I kind of doubt it. Okay, there's some printer mishaps that they're mundane and they're just sort of dumb sounding, but they still cause equally horrible compliance problems for you folks, and they're way more likely to happen. Like the printer's jammed or the printer's out of paper. So if it's just that the printer's out of paper, the people at the front desk will probably take some paper from their stash that they use for their printer. They use to print receipts and so on behind the desk. They'll probably take some of that paper and put it in the one the guests use. So running out of paper probably won't be an issue. But things like it jammed or like it went low on toner, the front desk staff, they're not going to fix it. They don't have the time. They don't have the know-how. Our maintenance guy will do that in the morning. So if you want to print something, come back after breakfast tomorrow, and it should be printing. But so what happens between now and then? When are these sensitive agency printouts going to just suddenly appear in a hotel lobby somewhere? And kind of worse yet, let's say Mary actually goes to print this thing and it prints and she gets her 9 pages and gets her envelope and stamps and she's happy. And then for some reason, the print service in the computer she used decided to randomly send duplicate jobs. This happens from time to time. And who is in charge of monitoring the output of the lobby printer and making sure that either somebody picks it up or it gets saved for the appropriate guest? The hotels don't do that. So, like I said, it's a teeter-totter. And the graphics got messed up on this. The two stacks, the two lists are supposed to be over the two kids. One of them's convenience and one of them's security. And for one of them to go up, the other one's got to go down, and vice versa. And the lists are in corresponding orders. So yeah, Mary had this old laptop. She's very familiar with it in the software environment. And that makes her more efficient. That makes it easier for her to do things. It's outdated, it's patched, it's susceptible to being hacked just by looking at the wrong web page. The hotel wireless, easy to use. FileZilla is easy to use. The thing is, we know the hotel wireless doesn't encrypt anything. FileZilla can if that's how you use it, or if that's how your server is configured to insist upon but we don't know that. For the online file conversion, we just gave it to somebody else that we just have to assume they're very likely the Russian mob. It was easy to convert, went real quickly. We don't know who handled that data. We don't know what copies they kept. And then, carrying the stick down to the computer and the printer in the lobby, we need to avoid printer risks. We need to totally distrust public computers. And if you want to look something up on, oh, I'm visiting Austin and I don't have a business dinner tonight, so I'll look at the Wikipedia page or I'll look at some page and I want to print out a few pages about things to look at. Like I saw this neat old building and what is it? I'll print that out. Yeah, sure, fine, do that. Just don't sign on to anything. So what if there'd been a VPN? Which I would expect that you very likely that's how you're going to have to do things is with a VPN. It's a virtual private network. It's an encrypted tunnel. Set up correctly, it could have protected Mary's connection to the agency. It would mean she would have to do a little more work, or she would have to be a little more patient for it to automatically get started up. It's going to be a little adjustment to the teeter-totter about that one factor, but it's going to leave everything else in a mess. What about if she'd used a smartphone as a mobile hotspot? If you trust the phone company, not to be totally paranoid, but you do have to realize you're trusting the phone company at this point. If you trust the phone company, your smartphone is going to be something along the lines of a VPN kind of. But even so, all the other things about carrying the USB stick down, using the public computer, using the public printer, the VPN or the phone as a hotspot didn't help any of that. So hopefully you were just cringing through that story and you knew all this already, and thanks for sitting patiently through it. But hopefully a lot of folks learned something new today. So be safe out there. Next month, there's going to be one of these that's going to concentrate more on the employee and the employee's family. That one's going to have, should have practical tips in it as well. So if you're somebody that has a certification, you don't want to let that thing die. So the last page of this is a certificate, and it's a separate file that you can grab a copy of it. I thought it was going to be a PDF file. Anyway, get that file and add your name after attendee, and then you can upload that to CompTIA, to ISC Squared, to whoever you have a certification from that you need continuing education credits. So Beth, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. This is Beth Hayden. I'm with Learning Tree, and I'm going to be curating all of the questions that we have in the chat pod. So if anybody has any additional questions, we've seen some really good ones come through, some of which I think you've already answered, Bob, but I'll go ahead and pose them. And if you have any other additional comments, you can certainly add them. One of the first ones I identified was, working on a VPN on an HHS laptop, isn't that the point of Global Connect? And I think you just addressed that. So anything you want to add on that comment?
No. I I figured that would be about the first thing to come up, and that was the first question, right?
Yeah.
Good for Texas, good for those folks. Yeah. And that's
Right.
why I said this is not a story about them, but it's saying that a lot of people would say, well, it all sounded pretty reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another one, very similar, you addressed it at the end. Is it better to use your phone as a hotspot? Is that a better alternative for wireless?
If you're very careful about how you set up your phone as a hotspot. So, when you're setting up your phone as a hotspot, guess what? You're doing some network engineering now. You're setting up a wireless access point. Do you have that set up appropriately? So
Right.
it's not, it seems like a very high-tech solution, and there's the risk of thinking, okay, and magic happens here.
Right. And then a similar question, iPhone hotspots, are they encrypted?
I've got an Android. I'm not sure about that one.
Okay. So maybe,
Something just moved there, and I thought maybe that was somebody contributing something. I think it's something that you can set up, but again, you would have to make sure you set it up carefully.
yeah. And
Um,
then I've seen, oh, sorry, go ahead.
and then I saw something flicker down here, something moved, and then somebody said, what about the hotspot wireless that the state provides? That's an excellent question. Don't ask me, um, but ask the relevant people there at work about it.
Okay, great. And then also a comment, I've seen a couple of them. What about working at Starbucks or a coffee shop? It's very similar to the hotel issue. Is that a correct
Yeah,
statement?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Because again, at Starbucks, they want to make it pretty easy.
Right.
Because that's why somebody would say, "Oh, there's a lot of places to get coffee, but I'm going to go to Starbucks because I know I can use the wireless there."
Great. And then one question also that came in, does using a hardwired Ethernet connection with a VPN avoid these issues? Most business hotels have Ethernet connections available as well.
That just means the bad guy needs to bring a cable and be in a room to sniff traffic. I think it probably makes it a little less likely, but it's not the sort of thing, you can't demonstrate. You can't say, well, I used a cable and therefore it's safe.
Got it.
And
Um,
I saw somebody mention something about using the VPN app on the phone, additionally the VPN on the laptop. And yeah, sure. I mean, now it's like it's double wrapped. You've got an encrypted tunnel inside an encrypted tunnel, and you're looking at defense in depth.
got it. Um, comment, what about signing into accounts on one's own personal laptop on a public Wi-Fi?
It would depend very much on the protocol that you were using, um, which nowadays it should be encrypted. So you're going to something like an HTTPS web server, or you're going to a POP S or IMAP S, an email server that only does things through an encrypted tunnel. And then it's going to depend on who the email provider is.
Okay. Some other
And
kind of,
I would hope that they all would, but it would be a thing to check.
okay. A couple other questions. How safe is Norton VPN?
I don't I don't know off the top of my head of uh, any current or recent exploits on that one. I don't use that one in particular. Um, like with anything, keep everything up to date. Keep your OS up to date. Keep all the applications up to date. That would include the VPN.
Got it. And
And
then
there's
somebody
a
just,
number of them that are out there that are good. A thing to watch out for is there are places that say, oh, we're offering this public VPN service, and you're connecting to and it's, they're out in the world somewhere, and you make a connection from wherever you are to their gateway, and then it's a VPN from there to somewhere else. And that's kind of like uploading your documents to somebody to convert. It's like, okay, my data is going to their endpoint as it is, and they can see it all. And I don't know who these people are, and they start encrypting it at their point. So if it's a thing you install on your endpoint, on your phone or on your laptop, then with quality product, that's good. Connecting to a VPN that's out in the world somewhere, I have a hard time coming up with a legitimate, real use for that, but it could sound very attractive.
great. Someone else says, is it safe to use the wireless at a relative's home where one needs to enter a long password?
If you trust the relative.
Okay.
But
And
yeah,
then,
if it's a long password, and as long as they're up to date and they're not using something ancient like WP, if they have a halfway recent wireless router, then yeah, that should be okay.
okay. And can we use the hotel Wi-Fi with our global VPN?
You have to ask whoever it is. Yeah, for the things about what we use at work, or this thing they tell us to use, this thing they offer us to use at work, ask the folks who are saying that. Somebody said, I need to know what is safe. That's a wonderful question. What do you do? I do end up using the hotel wireless, because how else am I going to get on the internet? What I do is I make sure that anything that matters is encrypted with my operating system or my application as the endpoint. I don't use webmail. I use Thunderbird myself. I know that I have Thunderbird set up so that the only way it will send or receive mail is through TLS, through an encrypted tunnel. For my email provider, which is Comcast, that's all that they support. And also Gmail. I use Gmail as well. And I have Thunderbird set up to retrieve it from Gmail. That's why I didn't think of it right at first. Same deal there. Only encrypted sending and receiving on both of those. If I do need to sign into a website, I'm not going to do that unless it's an HTTPS website. I make sure that my operating system and my applications are patched. So I run, I use Linux on my systems, and with the Mint distribution, that's really, it's actually a case where, hey, it's friendly and easy to use, and I've taken a close look at it. I'm not taking a security trade-off there. It doesn't always have to be a teeter-totter. And one thing it has down in the taskbar in the bottom is something that checks every 30 minutes, and I get a little red shield down there if an update is available. This morning, I updated 9 packages on both my desktop and my laptop, and rebooted both because one of them was the operating system kernel itself. That's how I behave.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Another question, how exposed are we to potential Pegasus attacks on our laptops?
I'm not sure. I would redirect that to your IT staff.
Okay, great. One person had asked, is there a difference for mobile workers versus teleworkers? Anything you want to comment about mobile
I
versus
saw that
teleworker?
real early on, and I don't know how to distinguish those two. I don't know what they're asking there.
Okay. Morgan, anything you want to add on that?
On the in general,
Oh, mobile workers versus teleworkers. Basically, I
I
think it
was
sounds like they would be the same.
I think maybe what the question is, it is a little vague. If we're talking about like mobile, just being at home, or if we're like talking about on the road. Again, the question was a little vague for me as well. I wasn't quite sure what they were asking. So if that person would like to give us a little bit of clarification, that might be helpful.
Okay, great. I see a question. I've noticed that some websites that I use while working at DSHS do not always have the HTTPS. They are HTTP and it actually shows not secure. How do these sites differ from those truly not secure outside of this?
So I'm going to assume truly not secure means that they're actually being willfully evil somehow. They're actually ill intent with malicious intent. If it's just plain old HTTP, you you don't have a way of being confident that I'm looking at the data that I think I'm looking at, or that I've connected to the server that I think I'm connected to. So HTTPS, and it adds a couple of things. One is the server identity, and then it does that first, and then if that works out, the second thing it does is it encrypts all the data that goes back and forth between the client and the server. And it authenticates the server first, because you don't want to send secrets to strangers. It's a thing you say, well, maybe it's actually okay, but I don't have a way of knowing that they're who they say they are. And I do know that my data is my requests, and the responses coming back are unencrypted. That means somebody could be listening in, but there's no way to tell somebody's listening in.
Very good. Is risk involved with the secondary authentication through a personal cell phone?
Um, so I am going to interpret that to mean like I'm signing into a website, and it says, okay, now we have to make sure it's really truly you. We're going to do a second factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, and we're going to send a text message with a number to your phone. And a lot of places are going to that, and should. And for more sensitive data needs better protection, and what's called multi-factor authentication is a big part of that. Now you've got to know a username and a password, but you also have to have physical control of this phone. And yeah, there's exotic attacks that somebody could steal your phone's identity basically, and intercept text messages that should be sent to you. The thing to be aware of is, okay, now you are really relying on your phone for your total personal identity. And if somebody can do two-factor authentication, that's more convincing that it really truly is you. So now things like protecting your phone become even more important. And it's not just, oh gosh, I lost this expensive thing and I got to buy a new one. If somebody finds it, could that give them advantage to convincingly being me, taking my place? So things like encrypting the storage, and making sure that it won't even, it won't boot up without entering a PIN number, become more important. And then, if you do that, and let's say you enter the PIN number a whole lot on your phone, and then hold it right in the light, and you very likely can tell smudge marks on the display which numbers you press more often. So they wouldn't know what your PIN is, but they would know which 4 digits were in it, possibly. And security is one of these things you never get to the end of it. It's things like, oh gosh, so now you're telling me I need to clean my phone regularly? Well, apparently, yeah.
Good point. So here's one that's clarification on the teleworkers. She says teleworkers are at home and have the opportunity to purchase recommended equipment to make our home telework location more secure. What do you suggest for that?
Oh, okay. Um, I that went a different way at the very end than I thought it was going. So I would check with the state and see what they recommend or approve, because they may already have either a recommendation or a requirement. I don't know. I don't know. Ask the right people down there, and Morgan should be able to maybe not quote right off the top of her head, but at least get you pointed in the right direction. And just practically speaking, if it was me, I'd want to talk to somebody and make sure, if I'm going to be going out and buying stuff, I don't want to buy something that a month from now they say, oh, this new requirement came out. Try to get some idea about, is there a requirement right now? And if they say, well, no, then I would say, do you think there's going to be? Is this something that's being defined? I want to make sure whatever I get, I don't have to replace in a few months.
And Andrew has some great suggestions in the chat. He says a VPN that you trust and another layer of VPN, such as OpenVPN to your router, using secure protocols and being cognizant of what you click on. So some really good suggestions. He also says WPA2, 16 to 18 character upper and lowercase, no words,
Yeah,
passwords for the router. So really, really good suggestions there as well.
yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
I've stayed in some hostels that had passwords like that, and it looked kind of crazy. But and I would chuckle when I would see it. It's like this would never fly at the Hilton Garden or somewhere like that. That would never ever work. But yeah, WPA2. Another thing to watch out for on routers, and I'm surprised they still. I'm surprised, but then I think for about 10 seconds, and I'm not surprised anymore. It's a convenience versus security trade-off. There's a thing called WPS, and it's this button on a wireless router that you can push the button and it makes everything secure. And as soon as I heard about that, I was like, no, that's obviously that can't be so. And it's actually worse. WPS is really, really flawed, but it makes it really trivially easy to associate a device with a wireless router. So like somebody had the question about, what if I go to my uncle's house or something like this? Um, if they say, oh, it's real easy, we just push this button and you're on my network, I would say, well, that's okay. I'm ready to type in a big, long, complicated password. Let's do this. And if they, and personally, if they said, oh, I never do that, I'd say, let me set you up. Let me spend about 10 minutes here and make your wireless more secure and actually make a complex password.
Great.
But yeah, WPS, turn it off. And if it's something like you bought this router and it's got that button on there, just don't use it.
Right. Another question, is it okay to use our state laptops in the hotel to review documents or client records on the internet as long as we are on VPN?
That sounds like a Texas policy question to me.
Okay. Okay. What if they create a QR code in place of a password? I think that's basically, as long as it's representing a long password, I think that should be okay. Is that
Yeah, the QR. So you're talking about like you're going to use this on the phone or something like this. Yeah. And exactly the way you said it, Beth, about if it's what it's representing. If it's the word password, no. But
right?
if
Right.
it's the long complex jumble, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's all of the questions. So I think what I want to do at this point, Morgan, is do you have any closing comments before we finish?
Yeah, I just want to let everyone know that we're going to get all of the questions from the chat and we're going to create a Q&A that's going to go up on our information security training and awareness site along with the slide deck and the link to the presentation if you guys want to watch it again, or if you had a colleague that wasn't able to make it so they can go and see it. So we'll make sure that those are curated and get you some of the questions you asked that are specific to HHS policy. We'll make sure that those are answered there as well to give you guys a little bit more security in that. Going ahead and closing it up, Bob, thank you so much for speaking to us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. And to everyone, to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Security awareness presentations are really important, but without you all attending, they really don't make as much of an impact. So we very much appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Be on the lookout for registration notifications for part 2 of today's webinar series, Working from Home, Secure or Unsecure. And we're going to be covering a lot of those questions we got at the last about, how to help beef up your home security to make it something that, not only the state can be secure, but also your family as well. That's going to be coming to you August 18th at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. So until then, everyone, Please stay safe and stay cyber fit. Thank you all so much.